when there's uncertainty, there's always certainty in real estate. So why have your money in a bank? Why invest in a volatile stock market?
All right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Light It Up Podcast. We are super excited to have with us today Jeffrey St. Arromand out of the Sirhan team, and he is one of the team leaders of Team Trisha Lee, his fiance, right? Jeffrey's got some big goals this year, $80 million in production, and we're super excited to go a little bit deeper with him on how he's going to tackle that. And you know, the other thing I didn't include in your intro too, which is probably one of the more exciting things, because I mean, we talk to people who sell 20, 50, 100 homes a year, you know, that stuff is all fun, but 3-time Emmy award-winning sports producer for CBS, NBC, and TNT, where he worked on a variety of primetime events, including Super Bowl, Olympics, and NBA for over 10 years.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was an interesting experience. And then I did what I coined a power pivot. And I pivoted into real estate. So here we are now.
Yeah. There's a big power coming from that kind of experience because you could trigger emotion through what you deliver, the message you can deliver. So that's emotion makes people act. Logic makes them think. So you're focusing on the action by triggering that. So that's awesome. Hopefully we can get into that today too.
All right, lightning round. Here we go. So Jeffrey, who had the most influence on you growing up?
So ironic because I'm about to meet with her right now. It's my sister, my oldest sister. She's done great things. She was a partner of a law firm at 27 years old.
Nice.
She's really the creator of the power pivot, quite frankly, because she pivoted from law going into becoming an angel investor now. And so seeing her and the fearlessness that she had going from one capacity that she was really the top of the field, the top of her profession and career, to go to something else. I thought that was really just great, quite frankly, and especially, you know, being a woman and a woman of color, you know, in spite of all those things, you know, taking that leap of faith to do it, that she's been probably one of the biggest impacts in my life, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's sweet. What's the 3 biggest turning points in your life?
Interesting. I'd say 1, the experience I had going to Florida A&M University. That was one huge experience. That's the HBCU. And now they're, you know, it's cool and it was always been cool, but on a national scale, it's more accepted and received now. Back then, it was like, oh, maybe you went there because you couldn't get to University of Pennsylvania or an Ivy League school or whatever. But I think going there was a tremendous turning point in my life. Also, ultimately going through all the post-grad internships and then getting my first entry-level job at CBS. That was the one thing that was instrumental. And then I worked my way up through the ranks and ended up becoming freelance and working with other networks. But that was definitely a great imprint on my life. And then the third would be 2 things, actually, would be my daughter, who's now 11 years old, going on 30, and my daughter / and my fiance. Those 3 things were pretty impactful, pivotal moments in my career, in my life.
Awesome. Let me ask you this. What do you regret not doing when you were younger?
Not making this pivot into real estate sooner.
Yeah.
You know, there's always this glamour and this, you know, I'm a creative, and that's period. That's a core of who I am. But when you think about generational wealth, when you think about just not working as hard, production is great when you get to meet and do stuff with, you know, everyone from Tom Brady to Kanye West, or working with, you know, any number of talent, going to great events like the Olympics and Super Bowl and all that. It sounds so great until you're actually doing it. And then you're traveling every week and you're doing that. Had I gotten into real estate sooner, I'd be so far advanced in my career. But in retrospect, I think going through the production route was really helpful because I was able to cultivate certain skill sets that I can now use in real estate. So I wish I would have started real estate earlier, but you know, everything happens for a reason. And so now I could use that to expedite the learning curve and to get where I am now.
Yeah. Being someone who's a creative and a marketer, what's something that you're worried about that the next generation has to face?
Really is just the unknown of, you know, constantly having to learn something new because technology changes within 24, 48 hours. Something different is coming up and something new is being innovated. So just having to constantly being able to learn something different. Maybe it could be now, you know, chat GBT is one thing. Who knows what's going to come up in like 3, 4, 5 years from now, or a decade from now.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing, the constant change of technology.
Yeah. The adapting is the hardest part. That's for sure.
Yeah. And at the same time, also knowing the importance of the basics, because no matter what, certain level of things, especially as it comes into real estate, it's never going to get old.
Yeah.
Never.
All right. Final question for lightning round. What book have you read recently that you would recommend and why?
I reread this recently. It's 10,000 Hours by Marcus Gladwell. And I don't even know if that's the title, but that's essentially what the thesis of the book is about. Once you practice something for 10,000 hours and become an expert at it. That was a really good book. I spoke to someone about it recently, and they said, "Hey, I just reread that," and then I decided to read it again. And you always find some new gems in those books, especially his book. I think he's really insightful in some of the things that he mentioned. So that was it. That was a good one. And I would recommend everyone to read that, especially if you're embarking on a new career, or you want something to really, you want to have a change in what you're doing currently and just get rejuvenated. That would be a good book for that.
Is he the same author of David versus Goliath?
That might have come out before. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure if it was the same author. I was just like, because it's he always talks about like the underdogs coming up and defeating something, right? And using their disability or their weakness to their advantage to the 10th degree. Right. Mm-hmm. Which kind of is interesting in your situation. You came from a marketing background and you went to sales and
production, right?
Well, marketing. Yeah. Like, doing essentially, being out there and being a personality, being a creative with people and showing people personality on television to going into sales. And we've always been taught that there's marketing and there's sales. People intertwine them, but they're two different things. One attracts them in, one is to convert them there. For you being strong in the marketing aspect coming into a sales industry, what are some of the things that you had to learn, and what are some of the things that you went double down on that was your strengths to help you succeed in the business?
I'll start with the things that I had to learn. I kind of alluded to it earlier. I had to learn, and you've heard this, I've heard this plenty of times. You don't know what you don't know. So going into a new field, I thought it was really important to get coaching to help me to expedite that learning curve. Because like I said before, I want to be at the top of this field, coming from being at the top of the production field. So I immediately got coaching because I realized there was, a need for me to know. And I pretty much was familiar with the transactional process, but there were different nuances that I didn't know that I really need to know inside out, especially if I'm trying to advise someone on either side of the transaction. Mm-hmm. So that I doubled down heavy on. I did, the Tom Ferrys of the world, Buffini's of the world, Ninja Selling. And then now I'm doing it with Ryan Serhant here at Sell It Like Serhant. In fact, I was head of a cohort that basically coaches to other agents about different aspects of the industry. So I think that's important. And to answer the first part of the question, what I really, really went hard at was storytelling. And I think in production, you're always telling a story, and with the house and selling a home, or whatever it is, you're telling a story of that home. How does that prospective buyer, how do they feel living in that home? What's the energy of the home? What's the energy of the neighborhood? So I would do videos. So now once I ultimately joined Serhant, which I've been here for a year, we have a in-house production team, the only firm throughout the country that has an in-house production team. And so talent level of these camera people, all these technicians, they're phenomenal. I didn't expect that coming in. Nice. I was like, whatever it is, I'm going to make it work. I've worked with everyone. I'll make it work. But then to couple the talented production folks with someone like me that has, creative ideas, and then we bring that together and we're telling great, captivating stories. And, sometimes it may sound a little cliche. Yeah, you're not selling anything on social but we actually do. And I have personally, just last year, there was a couple of 2 homes that we sold because the buyers saw the video. And that just gave them a complete understanding of the neighborhood, all the architectural detail of the home, and that brought them right in. And then to your point, you capture them, and now you got to convert them. So coming in, once they came in, then I had to use the knowledge and the skill that I gained via the coaching to really, secure the buyer and then negotiate accordingly and make it work. But that's what I really doubled down on since joining Serhant, is really understanding the importance of my personal brand, separate from Serhant, because I can get caught in the huge umbrella of Ryan Serhant and all that he has. But what I look to do is and what I say my fiance and I, what we look to do is align our brand with Ryan's and use that to get into other spaces that we couldn't get into our own. But then once we're there, establish our brand of whom we are and what we do different.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done.
No, that's powerful. And the cool thing about being able to do storytelling, right? Because you even said this earlier, being a homeowner and an investor, right? You're able to share stories about experiences so that when someone's scared about something, you could be like, well, I was in that same position too, but then I did X, Y, and Z. So your depth of knowledge is much more. You're able to connect to them on another level as well. What are some things that you see that if someone wanted to emulate what you're doing, that they do incorrectly, that they should actually be pivoting?
I think not really understanding the importance of what they put out on social platforms. Everyone shows, transparency is so key. If you're able to, like as a new agent, well, not new, but newer agents, oftentimes they think they need to look like $1 million listing, or they need to do that and need to show the most glamorous property. What would resonate more on both a local and national level is to show that you're starting with rentals and you're learning that grind. You're now embarking on your first sale that may be $600,000-$700,000, and contingent on your market, that's a big number. And whomever you're selling, and just keeping in mind whether you're working with a buyer or seller, that's going to be more times than not their biggest purchase. Mm-hmm. So treating that property and treating that transaction that way. And to get back to my point initially, is also, showing your journey of going through the process of, if you didn't get a listing, that's okay. Share how and why you didn't, and what did you learn from it, and how can you learn from it, and understand that you don't have to have the 10, 15, $20 million property right away. Show what you have now, and you'll get more people and get more followers because they'll see you grow to that, your first $1 million listing, or your first 5 or 10 or whatever it is. So don't feel necessary that whole notion of fake it till you make it. I think the transparency will help you make it faster, quite frankly, than faking it and then hoping that you land in the right place and get the right opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so true. So many people spend time trying to build themselves up instead of just, I've always wanted to just do like a whole segment on just like, here's 10 things I did wrong, right? I went on this appointment and I didn't pre-qualify and I didn't get the listing. Or I went on this appointment and I didn't ask if they were interviewing other agents, and turns out they interviewed somebody an hour before me and they signed with them, and by the time I showed up, they weren't even ready. They were already signed with somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Just showing more of like the vulnerable side of like, here's some things I did wrong, so you can learn from it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the topic that came up just recently was you can't time the market. It's your time in the market that counts. And it's like you can't time the content that you're going to produce based on the circumstances that you're in. It's how consistent and you're being front of mind, more or less, right? It's like your time developing it versus tracking when's the good time for you to be seen at your highest peak or whatever the case it is. We have an inside joke almost where whenever we interview agents and they say, I want to be like one of those people on $1 million listings. We're like, it's one of those. Like they're going to be out in a week because once they start hustling, they're like, fuck, this is not what I thought it was at all.
Right.
But that's the struggle overall is people don't want to do the work that it takes, and creating that content, being a creative, trying to reach and do storytelling is super hard for me. And I think we would both be in that category that we think it's harder than actually making cold calls or prospecting. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So somebody who's like an old dog now, not a new person, what's some things that they can do to implement to be able to do storytelling, marketing the way that you do for their clients, for their own personal brand as well?
I think what's important is to, number one, be on the pulse of what's happening in the market. And, right now, many people will think, well, there's really no need for agents because, they can represent themselves, buyers. I'm speaking to buyers right now. They can represent themselves, or, they have access to, locally your MLS, or here in New York's Trees, whatever, Zillow, whatever other platform. But there's so much information that it's almost sensory overload because they have to determine what really resonates with them in their market. Yeah. So what I would say for someone that's just starting to come in, look at articles that are there and things that are happening right now, and then try to interpret that to your market and to whomever your consumer is. I know one thing that I did most recently, I first of all, I read everything every day, every morning. I'm reading The Real Deal. I'm reading a local, The Brownstoner. I read New York Post. I read Global Mansion. I'll read Curved. I read, 6 to 7 things I read every day. So I saw something on TMZ that spoke to a black couple in California that recently had their home, they did appraisal and their home came undervalued. They then brought in someone white to appraise it and they came up $485,000 more. And then they end up suing the appraisal company and they won. So I then saw that article. I spoke about that. I talked, what can you do in that, if you're in that case scenario? Obviously, lean on a real estate broker to give you accurate comps. Reach out to the appraiser, ask for them to do another appraisal. Contest the appraisal if need be. And then lastly, you have your Fair Housing Association, local Fair Housing Association. Speak to them, and then if need be, you can sue. You can look to sue in litigation against that appraisal company. But those type of things, that's good content because there's going to be someone in that scenario. And then now, obviously, we see the SVB that fell apart, Signature Bank that fell apart, and a lot of buyers are nervous by that, rightfully so. But if you have less than $250,000 in the bank, that really doesn't impact you. Right. Your money is covered by the FDIC, so don't get all up in an uproar about that because it doesn't really impact you. But the silver lining to that is that rates dropped because of this, and so that impacts you. So, just trying to really find, if you really hit your head against the wall, like, what do I talk about? What do I do? Just take a step back and think of what the consumer is seeing, and you interpret that to them to either calm them or tell them, this isn't a good time because of X, Y, Z. Yeah. So that I do that coupled with other good content.
There's one thing that comes to mind. It's, as you were talking about it, I was feeling an emotional trigger by some of the things you were saying, which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. So you're really good at doing that.
Well, that topic, in specific, is great for so many different reasons, right? We all, as agents, agent to agent, we all bitch and complain about appraisal issues all the time, right? And, the appraiser screwed it up. The appraiser didn't look at the right comps. The appraiser's not from my area. The appraiser's, really from Brooklyn. And, we need a guy who's, knows Tribeca. Then you bring the whole race card into it, right? That makes things controversial. And I'm sure your comments on that post were through the roof.
Yeah.
And then, then there's the age-old question that a lot of agents discuss on different platforms is like, well, what happens if the appraisal comes in low? Do I appeal it? Do I get another appraisal? Could I have prevented this by giving the appraiser comparables? So I think that's a great topic. So I think people, you could go in a lot of different directions here. I think people who don't do content every day struggle to find topics like that. I think some people, I'm just trying to think of issues that newer agents have, right? Some people might think of the topic, but they just, are uncreative enough to actually come up with the material.
Yeah. But the skill that, Jeffrey, what you've done is almost in a fearful market, people, the first thing that goes is trust. Yeah. Trust in the people that they're working with and trust in the market. You took a controversial piece that I saw that piece on there, right? It's like they had the African head on one of the house. It was like a picture in there. It's like you see like some tribal like things all around and you're like, that's fucked up. But then what you did is you turned it into a piece that you would talk about advice so someone can see you as a trusted advisor, right? Instead of someone who's just spreading it, right?
Right.
And then the same thing with the rates, right? When you're talking about, there is a lot of fear there, but let's look at what we can control, right? So it's like being a calming force, trying to be in a place where you can say, hey, let's focus on what we can do, and let's look at this piece of advice. So then you gain trust in that aspect.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, along those lines, I think it's important. We're talking about content right now. The biggest issue across the board are rates. And that's on both sides of the transaction, whether you be, a seller, if you're like, well, what am I going to move to? Am I going to get this type of rate? Like there's new talks of accidental landlords now because you're not going to find that 3% rate anymore. And then you have buyers who are, paralyzed because they don't want to go, they don't know what to do because the rates are so low. So now if you want content, let's talk about what's the creative way to go around these rates. Number one, you could, educate about buying down the rate. And what's the cost of buying down a rate, if that's one thing. If you're on the seller side and you have the wherewithal, consider seller financing. That's another option. If you're aligned with mortgage brokers, do some content with a mortgage broker and they can talk about the different products that they offer, whether it be the great interest only for right now and then you refi once the rates drop, or various ARMs. 15-year right now, that rate, is less than a 30, what that rate is. So you have to come up with creative ideas. Yeah, we're in a challenging market of sorts, but what are you going to do? And if you want content, explain what you're going to do and have someone there. And even if you aren't that knowledgeable, have someone there and showcase them. You mean to tell me a mortgage broker wouldn't want to get on social and talk about what they have to offer? They'd love to do that.
Yeah.
So lean on them and let them be the expert until you feel comfortable to talk about, a certain subject matter. So it's just a matter of, this is the time, and these times right now as agents, this is when the cream's going to rise to the crop. If you are unable to find a way to separate yourself from everyone else right now, you're not going to be in this business, because realistically, we may be this way for like another year, maybe a year and a half. So what are you going to do right now? How are you going to sustain? And this is when it's not easy right now, but this is when the best in the market, they're going to gain more market share because there are going to be less people around.
Yeah.
So and that's one way of looking at it. Some people look at it as a down market. I think it is a great way to gain more market share.
Yeah.
I think it's just like repurposing things too, right? Like, not to go back to the topic you were talking about, but the appraisal topic, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you said you saw that on TMZ.
Yeah.
So you saw it on TMZ. Odds are TMZ stole it from somebody else, right?
Right.
TMZ repackaged it. You then repackaged it. And now I'm sure somebody's seen your video and has repackaged that 2 more times. So I think people have to realize it's not that complicated, right?
It really isn't.
Just like we're going to repurpose this episode into short form, into Instagram Reels, into YouTube Shorts. We may ask you to rejoin us for a webinar. There's all sorts of it's just repackaging the same sort of material, but put your own spin on it. Yeah. Right.
And I think I absolutely agree with that. And I think the biggest issue with a lot of agents themselves, it's what's happening between the ears. They talk themselves out of doing it.
Yeah.
The production isn't great, or this. In this day and age with phones, get your phone and just do it right in front of your phone. That one post we talked about with the appraising, I just did a green screen. I grabbed a capture of the article, did a green screen on it, and just spoke right into the phone. What's so difficult about that? And then you want it to be perfect. Remember, we talked about the journey. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Yep.
Just be more consistent than you are perfect. You'll end up becoming perfect with more. It's just like sport. I always like for sports analogies. You gotta get a lot of at bats. But when you're at the plate, you gotta swing. Keep swinging. You may strike out, and don't expect the first time you hit the ball is gonna be a home run or something.
Yeah.
Just get a couple of easy singles. Maybe if you even need to bunt.
Yeah.
Just bunt to get yourself on base, just get on. And then the confidence will improve and the content will get better and the production will get better.
Yeah. We're our own biggest critic too, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Most people don't post the video or don't post the content they create because they don't like how they look, or they don't like their lighting, or the production sucks, or the audio is not good, right? But even if you get past all that and you do like it, you're going to hate it in 6 months anyway, right? Because whatever you're doing in 6 months is going to be better. It's going to be better audio, better video, better content, better editing. So no matter what, you're not going to if I go back on my own Instagram feed or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or our YouTube, our initial podcast, the first 10 episodes, I'm like,
drunk.
Oh God. Yeah, first 10 I couldn't do without having a couple drinks because I was nervous about what we were going to say and all that stuff. So you're not going to like the first stuff that you put out no matter what. Yeah. So just put it out.
Right. Absolutely.
The biggest struggle is the storytelling for me, honestly, because you're talking about the piece, and the thing that comes to my mind, I have had so many conversations with buyers and sellers recently where there's so much false information, I would say, out there, and perceived problems in the marketplace. But the one thing that I know is true is that when Biden recently said that they're going to take care of everybody's money, this and the other, that assumes that there's going to be a bailout and they're going to cover billions of dollars. And that assumes that they're going to be reprinting out money, which is a natural byproduct because he's not coming out of his pocket to do so. And according to Ray Dalio, who wrote the book Principles, one of the most key principles is when the Fed starts printing, you buy assets because those assets are going to appreciate like crazy. And when I start talking about that story and I say, well, hey, listen, if you could have bought a property in 2020, knowing the appreciation it got in the last 3 years, would you have done it? Screw what you had to pay, but just the appreciation, the gain, would you have done it? In a heartbeat. Well, what if you can see the writing on the wall that it's going to happen again? Would you wait to buy or would you want to buy? How do you transmit that into sexy marketing storytelling?
I think you just did a good job right there.
Did I really?
Yeah.
I was going to say that myself. That's
okay.
Great.
Right, I could have done it better, but
maybe try it.
No, I think you did a good job right there.
One thing that you mentioned is understanding the volatility of everything else outside of a true asset. A real hard asset like real estate. Yeah, there'll be some ebbs and flows in the market, but your money's not going to just poof and disappear. You're not going to have some huge dip if you're, and I'm talking like the crypto world, which, by the way, Bitcoin has been crazy since everything's happened with the banks. But just really communicating the notion of when there's uncertainty, there's always certainty in real estate. So why have your money in a bank? Why invest in a volatile stock market? Put your money in real estate. And yes, you get the appreciation, but you also get the depreciation that you get for 30 some odd years. So that's something else that you need to consider as well. And potentially, if you go multifamily, whether you live there or not, you can get that additional rental income coming in. Or if it's an investment property, you could, rental market is great because many people are not choosing to buy right now. So the rent numbers are increasing. So you really got to let them understand that when there's uncertainty, real estate is always a direction to go. In fact, that's what in some of my email blasts I put out today, I sent to some brokers. I told them, is your client's money really safe where it is right now? Why not take that? And obviously you have to edit your message to your audience. This is like a $6.7 million penthouse in Chelsea, but why someone that has that type of money, why just let that money sit in the stock market when you can put it in an asset here in New York, in Chelsea, in a penthouse that will appreciate, and you can use it as a pied-à-terre if you're not going to live there full time, or rent it for that matter, but your money is safe. That's a sexy way of doing it. If you have a property and you can really illustrate that, that's great. But if not, the direct messaging of the volatility of the market versus the certainty of real estate, that's pretty sexy too when it comes down to your wallet.
Yeah. It's very rare that I get these ahas, and I've been trying not to watch any bad news, but it just hit me. AI, and it's you hear these AI this, AI platform this. Silicon Valley Bank, right? People pulled out their money to do a couple things, right? Reinvest in their businesses and buy properties because of what's going on in inflation. And it costs a lot of money to leverage that, right? So if people are doubling down and they're leveraging the money elsewhere because they don't want to take the rate hit, that's what caused that to drop, right? In Silicon Valley first, which is interesting when you think about it, because that is a volatile situation across the board with all the fear of what's going on. Now, if someone doesn't have that big down payment, because that was the average account that was in there that had over 250,000 was like 93%. For the typical person, how do they get started in real estate the same way that you did?
Well, you just have to understand the means that you have. And again, I go back to the analogy of not having to hit a home run every time. I tell certain buyers, I'm like, look, let's just get a couple singles. So a single could mean let's get into a co-op. Let's get into a more affordable co-op where, especially if you're a first-time, let's talk, specifically the first-time homeowners. Let's get into a co-op where you're, number one, you're not just throwing away your rental money. So you have that. You make sure that you're in a good neighborhood where the property value is going to increase. So you get that, you generate some equity there. And then once you're in a better place financially, now you take the money you earn from there and you go and purchase something else. Or you could pull the money out and maybe pull and get another investment property. So just consider that regardless of where you are, and if you don't have the big amount of money for down payment, just consider something that's a little lower price point and look into those. And this is when you really need to lean on your real estate broker. Talk to them about what's the next hot neighborhood. And then you look to invest there. And that'll be obviously a lot less expensive than someplace that's hot now. But again, you have to shift your thinking from being a renter to a buyer. And if you think that way as a buyer / investor, and even it's like your property that you're going to live in, okay, well, I'll buy here now. And I may not have all the great restaurants and amenities right now, but I know 5 to 6 years from now, as that starts to evolve, I'm in early. So I'm gonna get a tremendous amount of equity. And then 5 to 6 years from now, I may end up earning more money anyway. So now I can go get another property. So it's not a notion of thinking big right away. Let's just get into the real estate game in whatever capacity you can. And so for me, I think co-ops is a great opportunity to get in initially. And then once you get more income, then go into the condo route. And with co-ops, they're typically pre-war anyway. So I'm speaking specifically to New York, they're pre-war anyway, so they're going to be a lot larger. You'll have a lot more space. So you're not going to have all the tons of amenities. You won't have a basketball court or what's hot now? Not squash, but what is it?
Pickleball.
I call it the fake tennis.
The pickleball.
Pickleball, exactly. You won't have your pickleball court there yet, but you'll have an asset is what you'll have. That's the way I tell people. Just But one line that I learned years ago from it was an uncle of a buyer that I had, and his nephew was on the fence about a property, and it wasn't like the ideal brownstone that they wanted. He was like, "Look, just acquire the asset. That's it." And that's what I tell folks: just acquire the asset, regardless of what it is. It's gonna continue to go up, especially when you're in New York.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Well, this has been insightful. What's a couple of key points that you want to leave the audience with?
There's always tough times. Just consider what your ultimate goal is and understand why you came into this industry to begin with, and know there are going to be difficulties now, but just keep that ultimate goal in mind and still push through. Know that this isn't easy, and I understand that it isn't easy. And I know people have this facade of looking at, showing you that it's all great. Don't get caught up in that. Keep your nose down, do the work, make sure your systems you have good systems in place, and you're doing the accurate marketing, and the results will come. It's not going to be overnight. It's just like you're planting a seed, and it takes forever. You got to continue to water it and water it and water it, and then all of a sudden you have sunflower seeds popping out, and you're great. But it takes some time, and so don't be discouraged when you don't get the results you want instantaneously, or even if it's after a year. There are times whenever you think that you're ready to quit, when you're on the other right, what's on the other side is that success waiting for you. So just have that tenacity, have that wherewithal to get through difficulty, and know that good things are on the other side.
It reminds me of Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
Who's the author?
Price Pratchett.
Take a look at that book, Jeffrey.
I will. What is it?
You can read it in one day.
Yeah. No, it's a two-sitter. That's what Steve Powers says, our coach.
Two seats on the toilet.
Yeah, you'll be done with the book. It's called U Squared. So it's like
I was just writing it down.
This thin, U Squared. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, Price Pratchett. It literally everything you were just talking about is there.
Yeah, it'll blow your mind. I think I've read it probably.
It's
probably the only book I've ever read 3 times.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
What books have you read 3 times?
A lot of books.
Yeah.
I'm a slow ass reader, man. That's how I remember everything. All right. Well, Jeffrey, it was a pleasure, man. What's the best way for someone to reach out if they want to connect with you?
I am on LinkedIn, Jeffrey St. Arromand. I'm on Instagram, JSA_sells, SELLS_NYC. And I am obviously on Facebook, Jeffrey St. Arromand. And you can reach me directly. You can send me an email at JSA @serhant.com. And I'll leave you a little bit of a tease. We're close to launching a new series on one of your top streaming services soon. How about that?
Awesome, man. I like that.
He didn't say Netflix, by the way. It's all right.
So it's open-ended. It could be Netflix, could be Amazon Prime, could be...
True. That's a good one.
It could be anything.
Awesome, man. Well, that sounds like you got some good things in the works, and we're excited to see what's ahead for you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a great time. Hopefully, whoever watches this got some great insight, and they continue on their real estate journey.
Absolutely.